They called for immediate assembly at the court-martial proceedings when allegations of unauthorized engagement surfaced against the patrol unit. No witnesses, no evidence. Protocol demanded testimony until Private First Class Elena Atlas Vasquez stood from the gallery. Her voice cut through the silence with unexpected authority. "Your Honor, I have evidence." The soldier they'd overlooked during the investigation had just produced physical proof that would exonerate her entire unit and expose the real enemy infiltrator who had been operating undetected for months. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If you enjoy stories that reveal how the most observant heroes often hold the key evidence that changes everything, consider subscribing for more content that explores the extraordinary awareness of those who see what others miss. The morning light filtered through the tall windows of the military courthouse at Fort Marshall when Colonel Diana Matthews entered the court-martial preparation chamber at 0645 hours. The prosecution team maintained their methodical review of evidence files and witness statements, faces focused on the serious task of pursuing justice in a case that had shaken confidence in unit integrity throughout the installation. Matthews moved with the measured pace of a career military lawyer, her untouched coffee cooling as she approached Major Robert Kim at the Primary Evidence Coordination Station. "Case status," she said, her voice carrying the authority of 26 years in military justice and complex legal proceedings. Major Kim straightened from his position over scattered evidence files, his hands pausing over detailed photographs and tactical reports. "All prosecution evidence compiled and verified, ma'am. Complete documentation of the alleged unauthorized engagement incident involving 3rd Platoon, Alpha Company during patrol operations 3 weeks ago." He gestured toward the evidence boards displaying timeline analysis and witness statement summaries. 8 soldiers face potential courts-martial for engagement of civilian targets without proper authorization or threat verification. Matthews approached the evidence display, examining the prosecution case materials. "Defense preparation status? Defense counsel has reviewed all available evidence, ma'am. Limited physical evidence and conflicting witness statements create challenges for both prosecution and defense. Primary evidence consists of radio transcripts, post-incident photographs, and testimony from surviving patrol members." The colonel's expression reflected the gravity of the situation. The case represented one of the most serious allegations of misconduct to emerge from recent combat operations, with implications that extended far beyond the individual soldiers facing charges. Military justice required thorough investigation and fair proceedings regardless of operational pressures or institutional concerns. Witness availability? All surviving patrol members are present and available for testimony, ma'am. Medical personnel who treated casualties are standing by. One potential witness remains unaccounted for in the official investigation. Matthews's eyes scanned the witness list and evidence summary. Continue final preparation. Ensure all parties understand the significance of these proceedings for military justice and unit integrity. As Kim coordinated the remaining preparation details, Matthews stepped away to review the complete case file. This wouldn't be the first complex court-martial she had overseen, but the circumstances surrounding this alleged incident raised questions about command oversight and tactical decision-making under combat stress that would influence military justice procedures regardless of the verdict. 50 minutes later, with all legal teams positioned and the military panel assembled, Matthews made her way to the bench. "Major Kim, call the court to order. All parties are present for proceedings in the matter of United States versus Staff Sergeant Thompson and 7 co-accused." The court-martial proceedings began throughout the courtroom where Private First Class Elena Atlas Vasquez sat in the gallery section, observing the legal proceedings that would determine the fate of soldiers from her patrol unit. Her presence seemed almost incidental, a junior soldier witnessing the military justice system address allegations that had emerged from combat operations she had participated in but apparently had little to say about. Sergeant First Class Michael Ranger Torres, the patrol's senior non-commissioned officer and primary defendant, maintained military bearing despite facing the most serious charges in the case. His composure reflected years of combat experience and professional discipline, even under circumstances that could end his military career and result in imprisonment. Neither Elena nor the other gallery observers spoke as the prosecution presented their opening arguments with systematic precision, outlining a case built on radio intercepts, tactical analysis, and witness testimony that painted a picture of unauthorized engagement resulting in civilian casualties. Only during the prosecution's detailed presentation of evidence did Torres exchange glances with other accused soldiers, his expression suggesting concerns about the completeness of the investigation and the accuracy of the allegations being presented. "The evidence will show," announced the prosecutor, that on October 15th, the accused patrol engaged civilian targets without proper authorization, resulting in 3 civilian deaths and violations of rules of engagement that represent serious breaches of military law and international humanitarian standards. The prosecution's case relied heavily on radio transcripts and post-incident analysis that suggested improper target identification and engagement procedures, though the evidence included significant gaps and inconsistencies that would challenge both prosecution and defense throughout the proceedings. Elena had earned her call sign, Atlas, not for physical strength, but for her ability to carry detailed information and maintain situational awareness under pressure, supporting her unit through comprehensive preparation and tactical knowledge that others often overlooked. Among her patrol members, her reputation for thorough observation and memory for operational details had proven invaluable during numerous missions. As the prosecution continued with detailed presentation of their evidence, Elena maintained professional silence despite her obvious familiarity with the events being described and her presence during the tactical situation that had led to these serious allegations. The tactical situation described by radio transcripts indicates deliberate engagement of civilian targets despite clear rules of engagement prohibiting such action without verified threat assessment and proper authorization from tactical operations centers, the prosecutor continued. The detailed timeline and technical analysis presented by the prosecution created an apparently compelling case for unauthorized engagement, though careful observers noted significant gaps in the evidence and inconsistencies in witness statements that would provide opportunities for effective defense advocacy. As the prosecution concluded their opening presentation and the defense prepared to respond, Elena continued her silent observation from the gallery, her presence seemingly peripheral to proceedings that would determine whether her fellow soldiers faced imprisonment and dishonorable discharge. "Your Honor," announced the defense counsel, "the defense will demonstrate that the accused patrol acted within authorized rules of engagement when confronted with immediate threats to patrol safety and civilian protection, and that the allegations result from incomplete investigation and misinterpretation of tactical communications under combat stress." The defense opening outlined a significantly different interpretation of the same evidence, suggesting that the patrol had responded appropriately to genuine threats, and that civilian casualties had resulted from enemy action rather than unauthorized engagement by coalition forces. The conflicting interpretations of evidence and tactical circumstances created the foundation for complex legal proceedings that would require careful analysis of combat operations, tactical decision-making, and the application of rules of engagement under challenging operational conditions. The evidence will show that Staff Sergeant Torres and his patrol acted with appropriate tactical judgment when confronted with immediate threats, and that their actions prevented greater civilian casualties that would have resulted from enemy operations in the tactical area, the defense counsel continued. As the opening statements concluded and the court prepared to hear detailed testimony, Elena maintained her position in the gallery, apparently content to observe proceedings without participating in the legal process that would determine her fellow soldiers' futures. The first prosecution witness was called to present testimony about the tactical situation and radio communications that formed the foundation of the case against the accused patrol members. "Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, please describe the tactical communications you monitored during the incident on October 15th, the prosecutor requested. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, who had been monitoring radio traffic from the Tactical Operations Center during the patrol, provided detailed testimony about communications that suggested unauthorized engagement and improper target identification by the accused patrol. At approximately 1,347 hours, I monitored radio traffic indicating engagement of civilian targets without proper authorization or threat verification. The patrol's communications suggested deliberate targeting of non-combatant personnel in violation of established rules of engagement, Rodriguez testified. This testimony provided crucial support for the prosecution's case, though cross-examination would reveal significant limitations in Rodriguez's ability to assess the tactical situation from the operations center without direct observation of the patrol's circumstances. The prosecution continued with additional witnesses who provided supporting testimony about radio communications, post-incident analysis, and evidence collection that supported allegations of unauthorized engagement and improper tactical decision-making. Medical personnel testified about treating civilian casualties whose injuries were consistent with coalition weapons fire, providing forensic evidence that supported prosecution allegations about the source and nature of the civilian deaths that had triggered the investigation. Intelligence analysts provided testimony about post-incident investigation that suggested the patrol had engaged civilian targets without proper threat assessment, though their analysis relied heavily on incomplete information and assumptions about tactical circumstances that would be challenged during cross-examination. As the prosecution case continued through multiple days of testimony and evidence presentation, Elena maintained her silent observation, taking notes, but apparently having no intention of participating in proceedings that would determine whether her fellow soldiers faced serious legal consequences. The defense began their case by challenging the prosecution's interpretation of radio communications and tactical circumstances, presenting alternative explanations for the evidence that suggested appropriate tactical response rather than unauthorized engagement. Staff Sergeant Torres, please describe the tactical situation your patrol encountered on October 15th, the defense counsel requested during direct examination of the primary defendant. Torres provided detailed testimony about enemy contact, immediate threats to patrol safety, and tactical decisions made under combat stress that resulted in engagement of what appeared to be civilian targets, but were actually enemy personnel, using civilian clothing and positions. We received incoming fire from positions that appeared civilian, but were clearly being used by enemy combatants. Our engagement was directed at verified threats that posed immediate danger to patrol members and civilian personnel in the area, Torres testified. This testimony provided a significantly different interpretation of the tactical circumstances, suggesting that the patrol had responded appropriately to genuine threats rather than engaging unauthorized civilian targets, as alleged by the prosecution. Additional defense witnesses provided supporting testimony about the tactical situation, enemy tactics involving civilian concealment, and the challenges of target identification under combat conditions that supported the defense theory of appropriate tactical response. Combat veterans with extensive experience in similar tactical situations testified about the difficulty of distinguishing between civilian and combatant targets when enemy forces employed civilian concealment tactics, providing context for understanding the patrol's tactical decisions. As the defense case continued, it became apparent that the legal proceedings would hinge on interpretation of tactical circumstances and the application of rules of engagement. Under complex combat conditions that challenged clear legal determinations, the prosecution and defense had presented conflicting interpretations of the same evidence, creating reasonable doubt about the appropriateness of the patrol's actions while maintaining serious questions about potential violations of military law and international humanitarian standards. During the final phase of the defense case, when it appeared that the legal proceedings would conclude without definitive resolution of the conflicting evidence and testimony, Elena made a decision that would fundamentally alter the court-martial proceedings. "Your Honor," Elena announced, rising from her position in the gallery, "I request permission to present evidence relevant to these proceedings." Colonel Matthews looked toward Elena with surprise and professional interest. "State your name and relationship to these proceedings." "Private First Class Elena Vasquez, Your Honor. I was a member of the patrol involved in the incident under investigation, and I have physical evidence that I believe is relevant to determining the facts of this case." This unexpected development created immediate attention throughout the courtroom as legal counsel, defendants, and observers focused on Elena's announcement that she possessed evidence that had not been presented during the extensive investigation and legal proceedings. "Approach the bench," Matthews ordered, requiring Elena to present her evidence for judicial review before determining its admissibility and relevance to the proceedings. Elena moved to the front of the courtroom and presented a small fabric patch to Colonel Matthews, explaining its significance and how she had obtained it during the tactical incident that had led to the court-martial proceedings. Your Honor, this is an enemy uniform patch that I recovered during the incident on October 15th. It was attached to clothing worn by one of the individuals who was engaging our patrol with small arms fire from positions that appeared civilian but were actually enemy fighting positions. The uniform patch represented physical evidence that could support the defense theory that the patrol had engaged legitimate enemy targets rather than unauthorized civilian targets, as alleged by the prosecution. Colonel Matthews examined the patch and consulted with legal counsel before determining that the evidence was relevant and admissible, though its significance would need to be established through proper testimony and expert analysis. Private Vasquez, you will be sworn as a witness to provide testimony about the circumstances under which you obtained this evidence and its relevance to the charges against the accused, Matthews announced. Elena was sworn as a witness and took the stand to provide testimony that would fundamentally change the legal proceedings and the understanding of what had occurred during the tactical incident on October 15th. Private Vasquez, please describe the circumstances under which you obtained the uniform patch you have presented to the court, the defense counsel requested during direct examination. Elena provided detailed testimony about the tactical situation, enemy contact, and her observation of enemy personnel using civilian concealment while engaging the patrol with military weapons from prepared fighting positions. During the engagement, I observed enemy combatants wearing civilian clothing over military uniform items. When I approached one of the positions after the engagement ended, I recovered this enemy uniform patch that had been concealed beneath civilian clothing, Elena testified. This testimony provided crucial support for the defense theory that the patrol had engaged legitimate enemy targets rather than civilians, though the prosecution would have opportunities to challenge her observations and the significance of the physical evidence. Elena's detailed memory of the tactical situation and her systematic observation of evidence during and after the engagement provided testimony that filled significant gaps in the investigation and offered explanations for the conflicting evidence that had formed the basis of the prosecution case. The individuals we engaged were using civilian clothing to conceal their military status, but they were clearly combatants with military training and equipment. The uniform patch proves that they were enemy military personnel rather than civilians, Elena continued. During cross-examination, the prosecution attempted to challenge Elena's observations and the significance of the uniform patch, questioning why she had not reported this evidence during the initial investigation and whether her testimony was reliable given her obvious interest in exonerating her fellow patrol members. Private Vasquez, why did you not report this evidence during the initial investigation that led to these charges? The prosecutor asked. Elena explained that she had not been interviewed during the investigation and that no one had asked her about physical evidence she might have collected during the tactical incident, revealing significant gaps in the investigative process. I was not contacted by investigators, sir. I assumed that the investigation would be thorough and that investigators would interview all patrol members about evidence we might have observed or collected during the incident, Elena responded. This explanation revealed that the investigation had been incomplete and that potentially exonerating evidence had been overlooked due to inadequate investigative procedures rather than any attempt to conceal relevant information. Expert testimony was presented to authenticate the uniform patch and confirm its origin as enemy military equipment, providing additional support for Elena's testimony about the nature of the individuals engaged by the patrol. Military intelligence analysts confirmed that the uniform patch was consistent with enemy military uniforms and that enemy forces in the area had been known to use civilian concealment tactics during combat operations, supporting the defense theory of legitimate tactical engagement. The presentation of Elena's evidence and testimony created reasonable doubt about the prosecution's case and provided alternative explanations for the civilian casualties that supported the defense theory of appropriate tactical response to enemy contact. During closing arguments, the defense emphasized Elena's physical evidence and testimony, as proof that the patrol had acted appropriately when engaging enemy combatants who were using civilian concealment tactics in violation of international humanitarian law. The prosecution acknowledged Elena's evidence, but argued that it did not excuse potential failures in target identification and verification procedures that should have prevented civilian casualties regardless of enemy tactics. The military panel deliberated for several hours before returning with verdicts that reflected the impact of Elena's evidence on their understanding of the tactical circumstances and the appropriateness of the patrol's actions. Staff Sergeant Torres and 6 co-accused were acquitted of the most serious charges related to unauthorized engagement of civilian targets, though some received minor disciplinary action for procedural violations during the tactical engagement. One accused soldier was convicted of failure to follow proper engagement procedures, but received a relatively minor sentence that reflected the panel's understanding of the challenging tactical circumstances revealed by Elena's evidence and testimony. The court-martial proceedings concluded with recognition that Elena's evidence had been crucial for determining the facts of the case and ensuring that military justice was served based on complete information rather than incomplete investigation. Colonel Matthews commended Elena for her attention to detail and willingness to present relevant evidence, noting that her testimony had been essential for understanding the true nature of the tactical incident and ensuring appropriate legal outcomes. The case became a precedent for the importance of thorough investigation and comprehensive evidence collection in military legal proceedings, with Elena's overlooked evidence serving as an example of how incomplete investigations could lead to inappropriate legal action. Military investigative procedures were revised to ensure that all patrol members were interviewed during investigations and that physical evidence collection was more systematic and comprehensive, preventing similar oversights in future cases. Elena's attention to detail and systematic observation during combat operations became examples of the importance of individual awareness and evidence preservation for military personnel operating in complex tactical environments. The uniform patch she had preserved became part of the permanent case record and was used in military intelligence training. To demonstrate enemy tactics involving civilian concealment and the importance of physical evidence in tactical analysis, Elena's testimony was incorporated into military legal training curricula as an example of how individual observation and evidence collection could be crucial for ensuring appropriate outcomes in military justice proceedings. The acquittals resulting from Elena's evidence restored confidence in the military justice system's ability to reach appropriate verdicts when provided with complete information and thorough investigation of tactical circumstances. Military personnel throughout the installation gained increased awareness of the importance of evidence preservation and comprehensive observation during tactical operations, understanding that their observations might be crucial for future legal or operational analysis. The case influenced military rules of engagement training to emphasize the importance of target identification while recognizing the challenges posed by enemy tactics involving civilian concealment and the need for appropriate tactical response under combat stress. Elena's role in the legal proceedings demonstrated the value of including all personnel perspectives in military investigations and legal proceedings, ensuring that important evidence and observations were not overlooked due to rank or position assumptions. The defense counsel who had benefited from Elena's evidence praised her courage in coming forward with evidence that contradicted the official investigation, noting that her willingness to speak up had been essential for ensuring justice. Military leadership used the case as an example of how individual integrity and attention to detail could influence outcomes far beyond immediate tactical situations, affecting legal proceedings and institutional learning about combat operations. Elena's systematic approach to evidence collection during combat operations became a model for training military personnel in observation techniques and evidence preservation that could support future tactical analysis and legal proceedings. The case record documented how Elena's overlooked evidence had prevented wrongful convictions and demonstrated the importance of comprehensive investigation and inclusive legal proceedings that considered all available evidence and perspectives. Military historians analyzed the case as an example of how individual awareness and evidence collection could influence military justice outcomes and ensure that legal proceedings were based on complete understanding of tactical circumstances rather than incomplete investigation. Elena's transformation from overlooked patrol member to crucial witness demonstrated the importance of recognizing that valuable observations and evidence could come from personnel at any level of the military hierarchy. 6 months after the court-martial, Elena was promoted ahead of her peers and assigned to military intelligence duties where her demonstrated observation skills and attention to detail could be utilized for broader tactical and strategic analysis. Her new assignment involved training military personnel in evidence collection and tactical observation techniques, ensuring that her skills and experience would benefit future military operations and legal proceedings. The military intelligence community recognized Elena's natural capabilities for systematic observation and analysis, leading to specialized training that would enhance her contribution to military effectiveness beyond her original patrol duties. Elena's court-martial testimony became required study material for military legal education programs, demonstrating how individual evidence and observation could influence complex legal proceedings and ensure appropriate justice outcomes. The case influenced military investigative training to emphasize comprehensive personnel interviews and systematic evidence collection, using Elena's overlooked evidence as an example of potential gaps in standard investigative procedures. Military personnel policies were revised to ensure that evidence collection and observation responsibilities were clearly defined for all personnel, preventing situations where potentially crucial evidence might be overlooked due to rank or position assumptions. Elena's progression from patrol member to military intelligence specialist demonstrated how individual capabilities could be recognized and developed when revealed through challenging circumstances that required exceptional performance. The uniform patch that had exonerated her fellow soldiers was preserved as part of military history collections, serving as a permanent reminder of the importance of individual observation and evidence preservation during military operations. Elena's story became part of military ethics training curricula, demonstrating how individual integrity and courage in presenting evidence could ensure appropriate outcomes even when institutional processes had created incomplete investigation and potential injustice. Military legal training programs incorporated Elena's case as an example of how unexpected evidence and testimony could influence complex legal proceedings, emphasizing the importance of remaining open to new information throughout legal processes. The tactical analysis capabilities Elena had demonstrated during her testimony influenced her selection for advanced military intelligence training that would enable her to contribute to strategic planning and operational analysis at higher levels of military command. Elena's experience with military legal proceedings led to her assignment as a liaison between military intelligence and legal communities, helping to ensure that future investigations would benefit from comprehensive intelligence analysis and evidence collection. The case established precedents for evidence handling and witness testimony that influenced military legal procedures for years, with Elena's contributions being recognized as crucial for maintaining the integrity of military justice processes. Military leadership development programs used Elena's case as an example of how individual initiative and integrity could influence institutional outcomes, demonstrating the importance of moral courage and attention to detail for military personnel at all levels. The investigative procedures that had missed Elena's evidence were systematically reviewed and improved, leading to more comprehensive and effective military investigation protocols that would prevent similar oversights in future legal proceedings. Elena's systematic approach to tactical observation became a model for military intelligence collection training, influencing how personnel were prepared for evidence gathering and analysis during complex operational environments. The case record was used in international military cooperation programs as an example of effective military justice procedures that ensured appropriate outcomes through comprehensive investigation and evidence consideration. Elena's career progression from patrol member to military intelligence specialist demonstrated how individual capabilities revealed through challenging circumstances could lead to enhanced contributions to military effectiveness and institutional improvement. 5 years after the court-martial, Captain Elena Vasquez was selected for assignment to the Defense Intelligence Agency, where her proven analytical capabilities and integrity would contribute to national security intelligence analysis and collection. Her promotion to officer rank was attributed to her demonstrated leadership potential and analytical capabilities that had been revealed through her crucial role in the court-martial proceedings and subsequent military intelligence assignments. The training programs Elena had developed for evidence collection and tactical observation were adopted throughout the military intelligence community, influencing how personnel were prepared for complex analytical and investigative responsibilities. Elena's doctoral research on military legal proceedings and evidence analysis became classified doctrine that influenced military justice procedures and investigative training at the highest levels of military legal education. The case study of her court-martial testimony was incorporated into law school curricula for students preparing for military legal careers, demonstrating how individual evidence could influence complex legal proceedings and ensure appropriate justice outcomes. Military museums featured exhibits about Elena's case as an example of how individual observation and integrity could influence military justice and institutional learning, ensuring that her story would inspire future generations of military personnel. The evidence collection procedures that had been improved as a result of Elena's case prevented numerous investigative oversights over the following years, ensuring that military legal proceedings were based on comprehensive evidence and thorough investigation. Elena's legacy extended beyond individual recognition to institutional improvements in military justice procedures, investigative training, and evidence collection that benefited thousands of military personnel and enhanced the integrity of military legal processes. The uniform patch that had exonerated her fellow soldiers became symbolic of the importance of individual observation and evidence preservation, representing values that enabled effective military justice and institutional learning from operational experience. Elena's transformation from overlooked patrol member to influential intelligence officer demonstrated how individual capabilities could be recognized and developed through challenging circumstances that required exceptional performance and moral courage. Her story continued to inspire military personnel to maintain attention to detail and integrity in their duties, understanding that their observations and evidence could have far-reaching implications for military justice and institutional effectiveness. The court-martial proceedings that had been transformed by Elena's evidence became a permanent example of how individual courage and systematic observation could ensure that military justice was based on complete information rather than incomplete investigation. Lieutenant Colonel Elena Vasquez retired after 24 years of distinguished service, having transformed from an overlooked patrol member to one of the most respected military intelligence officers and advocates for comprehensive military justice procedures. Her career progression from patrol member to senior intelligence officer demonstrated how individual experiences with military justice could inform systematic improvements that benefited entire military communities and enhanced institutional effectiveness. The evidence that had changed the course of a court-martial proceeding had become the foundation for a career dedicated to ensuring that military investigations and legal proceedings were comprehensive, fair, and based on complete information. The soldiers whose careers she had saved through her evidence and testimony continued to serve with distinction, carrying forward the lessons about integrity and systematic observation that had characterized Elena's approach to military service. Her legacy was permanently enhanced by the demonstration that individual attention to detail and moral courage could influence military justice outcomes, while creating institutional improvements that ensured fair and comprehensive legal proceedings for future generations of military personnel. The voice that had cut through courtroom silence to present crucial evidence continued to echo through military legal communities decades later, representing the importance of individual integrity and systematic observation in ensuring that military justice was based on truth rather than incomplete investigation. Elena's story became a permanent reminder that the most important contributions to military justice often came from personnel who maintained attention to detail and moral courage, regardless of rank or position within the military hierarchy. The evidence she had preserved and presented became symbolic of how individual responsibility for truth and justice could overcome institutional limitations and ensure that military legal proceedings served their intended purpose of protecting both individual rights and institutional integrity. Her transformation from silent observer to crucial witness demonstrated that military justice depended not just on formal procedures, but on the individual courage and integrity of personnel who were willing to ensure that truth was revealed and justice was served appropriately. The court-martial that had been changed by Elena's evidence became a lasting example of how military justice could be enhanced through individual contributions that ensured comprehensive investigation and fair proceedings based on complete information rather than institutional convenience or incomplete evidence collection. The immediate aftermath of the court-martial proceedings created unprecedented analysis throughout the military legal community, as legal scholars and military justice advocates examined how a single piece of overlooked evidence had fundamentally altered the course of complex legal proceedings and prevented potential wrongful convictions. Within hours of the verdicts, classified legal analyses were being distributed among military legal commands worldwide, documenting Elena's evidence preservation techniques and analyzing how her systematic observation had revealed critical gaps in standard military investigative procedures. Military legal training centers initiated comprehensive review of evidence collection curricula to incorporate lessons learned from Elena's case, recognizing that her individual attention to detail had exposed significant weaknesses in institutional investigative capabilities and legal preparation procedures. The 8 soldiers who had been exonerated or received reduced sentences provided detailed statements documenting Elena's role in preserving their careers and reputations, describing how her evidence had provided hope and vindication when the military justice system had seemed to be failing them. Military legal psychologists studied the psychological impact of Elena's evidence on accused personnel, documenting how knowledge that comprehensive evidence existed had sustained morale and confidence in military justice during the stress of facing potential courts-martial and imprisonment. The physical evidence Elena had preserved during combat operations was systematically analyzed and incorporated into military intelligence databases, providing crucial information about enemy tactics and capabilities that had been unavailable through conventional intelligence collection methods. Legal organizations throughout the military reported significant improvements in their evidence collection and witness interview procedures following implementation of reforms based on lessons learned from Elena's overlooked evidence and testimony. Military personnel throughout all services gained increased awareness of their responsibility for evidence preservation and comprehensive observation during tactical operations, understanding that their attention to detail could have far-reaching implications for military justice and institutional integrity. Military historians began documenting Elena's case as a watershed moment in military justice procedures, demonstrating how individual integrity and systematic observation could influence legal outcomes and create lasting improvements in institutional capabilities and procedures. The evidence collection techniques Elena had employed during combat operations were analyzed and systematized by military intelligence experts, who identified innovative observation and preservation methods that exceeded capabilities of existing training and doctrine. International military legal organizations requested access to case materials from Elena's court-martial, recognizing that her evidence preservation techniques and legal testimony could enhance military justice procedures for Allied forces worldwide. Military leadership development programs incorporated Elena's decision-making during the court-martial as a case study in moral courage and individual responsibility for institutional integrity, demonstrating how junior personnel could influence outcomes at the highest levels of military justice. The investigators whose incomplete procedures had missed Elena's evidence received additional training and revised protocols, with many acknowledging that her case had revealed systematic weaknesses in their investigative approaches and evidence collection methods. Military legal education institutions modified their curricula to emphasize the importance of comprehensive witness interviews and systematic evidence collection, using Elena's overlooked evidence as a cautionary example of potential gaps in standard legal preparation. The uniform patch that had exonerated Elena's fellow soldiers was preserved and studied as a model for physical evidence preservation during combat operations, with its analysis revealing innovative techniques for maintaining evidence integrity under challenging tactical conditions. Military intelligence communities worldwide studied Elena's observation techniques during combat operations, identifying systematic approaches to tactical awareness and evidence collection that could enhance intelligence gathering capabilities during complex operational environments. The legal precedents established by Elena's case influenced military justice procedures for years, with her evidence and testimony being cited in subsequent legal proceedings as examples of the importance of comprehensive investigation and evidence consideration. Military personnel selection criteria were modified to identify individuals with the attention to detail and integrity that Elena had demonstrated, ensuring that future military units would benefit from personnel capable of similar systematic observation and evidence preservation. The tactical awareness training programs Elena developed based on her combat experience became standard curricula at military intelligence schools worldwide, influencing observation and analysis training for thousands of military personnel. Military legal ethics training incorporated Elena's case as an example of how individual moral courage could ensure appropriate legal outcomes, demonstrating the responsibility of all military personnel for maintaining the integrity of military justice processes. The communication networks that had been established to share lessons learned from Elena's case continued to facilitate improvements in military justice procedures, creating ongoing dialogue between legal, intelligence, and operational communities about evidence collection and legal preparation. Military technology development programs incorporated equipment innovations based on Elena's evidence preservation techniques, leading to improved tools and procedures for maintaining evidence integrity during tactical operations and legal proceedings. The cultural awareness and tactical knowledge Elena had demonstrated during her testimony influenced training programs for military personnel operating in complex environments where evidence collection and legal considerations intersected with operational requirements. Military contract organizations analyzed Elena's systematic approach to evidence preservation to develop improved procedures for civilian contractors supporting military operations, ensuring that non-military personnel understood their responsibilities for legal compliance and evidence integrity. The legal advocacy skills Elena had demonstrated during her testimony were studied and incorporated into training programs for military personnel who might serve as witnesses in complex legal proceedings, improving their ability to present evidence effectively and maintain credibility under cross-examination. Military financial management organizations studied Elena's resource allocation during evidence preservation activities, developing improved procedures for supporting legal proceedings and evidence collection during extended military operations without conventional logistical support. The leadership qualities Elena had demonstrated through her willingness to challenge incomplete investigation provided examples of moral leadership that were incorporated into military leadership development programs at all levels of command and professional education. Military quality assurance organizations analyzed Elena's attention to detail during evidence collection to identify best practices for maintaining standards and procedures during challenging operational conditions when institutional oversight might be limited or unavailable. The strategic thinking Elena had demonstrated through her systematic evidence preservation provided examples of long-term planning and institutional awareness that were incorporated into advanced military education and strategic leadership development programs. Military environmental awareness training was enhanced based on Elena's techniques for operating effectively in challenging tactical environments while maintaining focus on evidence preservation and legal responsibilities during extended combat operations. The information management capabilities Elena had demonstrated during complex legal proceedings influenced training programs throughout the military legal and intelligence communities, improving capabilities for organizing and presenting evidence during complex legal and analytical processes. Military organizational development specialists analyzed the impact of Elena's evidence on institutional learning, documenting how individual contributions could drive systematic improvements when conventional procedures were inadequate for addressing complex legal and operational challenges. The conflict resolution and advocacy skills Elena had developed through her legal testimony provided models for enhancing military personnel capabilities in legal proceedings and formal dispute resolution processes during complex institutional situations. Military technology integration training was improved based on Elena's effective use of multiple evidence preservation and presentation systems during legal proceedings, demonstrating how individual technical competence could enhance institutional effectiveness during complex legal processes. The project management and legal coordination skills Elena had demonstrated during court-martial proceedings provided examples of effective case management that were incorporated into military legal training programs for personnel managing complex legal cases and evidence presentation. Military emergency response training incorporated Elena's evidence preservation techniques under combat stress, demonstrating how individual preparedness and systematic thinking could maintain legal compliance and evidence integrity during tactical emergencies and high-stress operational situations. The adaptability and learning capabilities Elena had demonstrated throughout her legal testimony influenced training programs for military personnel operating in rapidly changing legal and operational environments where individual initiative was essential for institutional success. Military strategic communication training was enhanced based on Elena's effective presentation of evidence to diverse legal audiences, improving capabilities for military personnel communicating complex information during formal proceedings and institutional decision-making processes. The risk assessment and legal decision-making skills Elena had demonstrated throughout her evidence preservation and testimony provided examples of effective legal risk management that were incorporated into training programs for military personnel with legal responsibilities. Military performance measurement organizations analyzed Elena's systematic approach to evidence documentation and legal preparation, developing improved evaluation procedures for military personnel with legal and investigative responsibilities during complex operational assignments. The innovation and creative problem-solving Elena had employed throughout her evidence preservation provided examples of effective legal innovation that were incorporated into military legal training programs emphasizing adaptive thinking and systematic problem-solving. Military knowledge management training incorporated Elena's techniques for organizing and analyzing evidence during complex legal proceedings, improving capabilities for military personnel managing large amounts of information during legal and investigative processes. The stakeholder management and relationship-building skills Elena had developed through interaction with legal communities influenced training programs for military personnel managing complex relationships during legal proceedings and institutional coordination activities. Military succession planning procedures were modified based on analysis of how Elena's evidence preservation had created sustainable improvements in legal procedures that continued to benefit military justice long after her individual testimony. The mentoring and development skills Elena had demonstrated through her influence on legal training capabilities provided examples of professional development that were incorporated into military mentoring programs for personnel in legal and investigative roles. Military change management training incorporated Elena's techniques for influencing institutional procedures and legal practices during rapidly evolving legal situations where individual initiative could drive systematic improvements in institutional capabilities. The communication and coordination skills Elena had demonstrated through effective interaction with diverse legal professionals influenced training programs for military personnel assigned to complex coordination missions requiring interaction with multiple institutional and professional communities. Military institutional memory programs documented Elena's evidence preservation techniques to ensure that her innovations would be preserved and transmitted to future generations of military personnel with legal and investigative responsibilities. The decision-making frameworks Elena had employed during complex legal proceedings under uncertainty provided models for improved legal decision-making training throughout military legal communities and professional education programs. Military capability development programs incorporated Elena's techniques for maximizing legal effectiveness with limited resources, improving training for personnel assigned to resource-constrained legal and investigative operations. The sustainability practices Elena had developed during extended evidence preservation provided models for improving military environmental responsibility and resource conservation during legal proceedings and investigative operations. Military talent management organizations analyzed Elena's career progression following her legal testimony, developing improved procedures for identifying and developing personnel with exceptional legal and investigative potential and moral courage. The legal coordination networks Elena had influenced continued to provide procedural benefits years after her testimony, demonstrating the lasting impact of individual excellence on institutional legal capabilities and military justice effectiveness. Military doctrine development incorporated Elena's evidence preservation techniques as formal legal procedures, ensuring that her individual innovations became standard capabilities available to future military personnel with legal and investigative responsibilities. The legal training programs Elena had influenced based on her court-martial experience became standard curricula at military legal education institutions worldwide, influencing legal training for thousands of military legal professionals. Military research organizations conducted comprehensive studies of Elena's evidence, preservation, and legal testimony, publishing classified analyses that influenced military legal development and evidence collection doctrine at the highest levels of military leadership. The equipment innovations that had been developed based on Elena's evidence preservation techniques were incorporated into military procurement programs, improving legal capabilities for thousands of military personnel worldwide engaged in legal and investigative activities. Military historical preservation programs documented Elena's case as a significant example of individual legal excellence, ensuring that her story would inspire future generations of military personnel with legal and investigative responsibilities. The legal procedures Elena had influenced during her court-martial became models for military legal proceedings that were adopted by allied military legal systems worldwide, demonstrating the international impact of her evidence preservation and legal testimony. Military professional development organizations analyzed Elena's career trajectory following her legal testimony, documenting how individual legal excellence could influence career progression and professional recognition within military legal and investigative communities. The legal leadership principles Elena had demonstrated during her court-martial were incorporated into senior military legal leadership development programs, influencing legal leadership training at the highest levels of military legal command and education. Military strategic planning procedures incorporated Elena's techniques for long-term legal coordination and institutional development, improving strategic planning capabilities for complex military legal operations and institutional development initiatives. The legal resilience and perseverance Elena had demonstrated throughout her court-martial testimony influenced training programs designed to prepare military legal personnel for extended complex legal proceedings under challenging institutional and operational circumstances. Military efficiency improvement programs analyzed Elena's optimization of legal procedures during court-martial proceedings, developing enhanced methods for maximizing legal effectiveness with minimal resources during complex military legal operations. The legal coordination legacy Elena had created through her court-martial testimony continued to influence military legal effectiveness decades after her individual testimony, demonstrating the lasting impact of individual legal excellence on institutional capabilities. Military career management programs incorporated lessons learned from Elena's progression from combat soldier to legal expert, developing improved procedures for managing and developing personnel with exceptional legal and investigative potential. The legal innovation culture Elena had fostered through her court-martial testimony influenced military legal organizational culture, encouraging individual initiative and legal creativity within appropriate institutional frameworks and professional oversight mechanisms. Military transformation programs used Elena's evidence preservation as an example of how individual excellence could drive institutional change, demonstrating how legal innovation could emerge from individual initiative when conventional procedures were inadequate. The legal standards Elena had established during her court-martial became benchmarks for military legal excellence, influencing performance standards and evaluation criteria for military legal and investigative personnel. Military institutional learning programs incorporated Elena's evidence preservation as a model for how organizations could learn from individual initiative and incorporate legal innovations into formal doctrine and procedures. The legal decision-making processes Elena had employed during her court-martial influenced military legal decision-making training, improving legal judgment and decision-making capabilities for military legal personnel at all levels. Military innovation management programs analyzed Elena's evidence preservation techniques to understand how individual legal creativity could address institutional limitations and generate innovations that enhanced organizational legal effectiveness. The legal communication networks Elena had influenced during her court-martial evolved into permanent military legal coordination infrastructure, providing lasting procedural benefits that extended far beyond her individual contribution. Military legacy programs documented Elena's transformation from combat soldier to legal expert, demonstrating how individual legal excellence could influence careers and create lasting impact on military legal communities. The legal procedures Elena had pioneered during her court-martial became fundamental elements of military legal doctrine, ensuring that her innovations would continue to influence military legal proceedings for generations of military legal personnel. Major Elena Rodriguez's retirement ceremony was attended by military legal personnel from around the world, recognizing her transformation from combat soldier to one of the most influential legal advocates in military legal history. The military legal facility at the Defense Legal Services Agency was renamed the Rodriguez Legal Excellence Center, in recognition of her contributions to military legal procedures and institutional development. Her master's thesis on military evidence preservation became required reading at military legal schools worldwide, influencing strategic thinking about legal procedures and individual responsibility within institutional legal frameworks. The evidence preservation techniques she had developed during her court-martial were incorporated into international military legal cooperation agreements, enabling enhanced legal coordination between allied military legal systems during complex legal proceedings. Military legal personnel who had benefited from Elena's evidence preservation continued to serve with distinction throughout their careers, carrying forward the legal excellence and individual initiative that had characterized her evidence preservation techniques. The legal networks she had influenced during her court-martial continued to provide procedural benefits decades after her retirement, demonstrating the enduring impact of individual legal innovation on institutional legal capabilities. Elena's memoir, when finally declassified and published, became an international bestseller and was translated into dozens of languages, inspiring legal excellence and individual initiative among military legal personnel worldwide. The Evidence Preservation Museum at the Defense Legal Services Agency featured a permanent exhibit documenting Elena's court-martial and its impact on military legal development, ensuring that her story would inspire future generations. International military academies incorporated Elena's evidence preservation as a core case study in legal leadership and individual initiative, influencing military legal education and leadership development programs worldwide. The Rodriguez Foundation for Legal Excellence was established to provide educational opportunities for military personnel developing legal and investigative capabilities, extending Elena's legacy beyond active military service. Military legal excellence competitions were established in Elena's honor, encouraging continued innovation and excellence in legal procedures among military legal personnel worldwide. The legal doctrine that had emerged from Elena's court-martial continued to evolve and improve, ensuring that her legacy would continue to influence military legal effectiveness for decades to come. Military historians documented Elena's evidence preservation as one of the most significant examples of individual legal excellence in military legal history, ensuring that her contributions would be permanently preserved. The legal leadership principles Elena had demonstrated during her court-martial became standard elements of military legal leadership training, influencing legal leadership development at all levels of military legal command. Military legal organizations worldwide continued to study Elena's evidence preservation techniques, seeking to understand and replicate the legal excellence she had demonstrated during her court-martial testimony. The soldiers whose careers she had saved during her court-martial remained connected throughout their careers, forming a network of legal excellence that continued to influence military legal effectiveness long after the original court-martial proceedings. Elena's legacy extended beyond military legal communities to influence legal procedures and individual responsibility training throughout all military services, demonstrating the broad applicability of legal excellence and individual courage. The evidence preservation innovations she had pioneered during her court-martial continued to inspire new generations of military legal personnel, ensuring that her legacy of legal excellence and individual initiative would endure indefinitely. The voice that had broken courtroom silence to present crucial evidence had become legendary within military legal communities worldwide, representing the pinnacle of legal courage and individual commitment to military justice. Her transformation from silent observer to crucial witness remained a permanent inspiration for military legal personnel, demonstrating how individual legal courage could overcome institutional limitations and create lasting positive impact on military legal effectiveness. The evidence preservation that had begun as individual attention to detail had evolved into a legacy of legal excellence that influenced military legal procedures, training, and effectiveness at the highest levels of military legal leadership worldwide. Private First Class Elena Atlas Vasquez had become Major Elena Rodriguez, but her greatest legacy remained the demonstration that individual legal courage and evidence preservation could achieve results that seemed impossible and create institutional improvements that benefited countless military legal personnel. Her story continued to echo through military legal communities decades after her retirement, inspiring legal excellence, individual initiative, and commitment to military justice among legal personnel who carried forward her legacy of evidence preservation and legal courage. The courtroom where her voice had first been heard presenting crucial evidence had become a symbol of legal excellence and individual commitment, representing the values that enabled military legal effectiveness under the most challenging circumstances. Her evidence preservation had demonstrated that sometimes the most important military legal contributions came not from following procedures, but from having the legal courage and individual initiative to preserve evidence and speak truth when military justice and institutional integrity were at stake. The legacy of Major Elena Rodriguez continued to influence military legal excellence long after her voice had stopped echoing in military courtrooms, ensuring that her example of evidence preservation and legal courage would inspire military legal excellence for generations to come.